Hello, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to today's session on how to support your students' transition to read. And we're specifically talking about students who have disabilities today. So today we have me. I'm Jess Gibson. And before I get into that, I just want to mention today's information session is being recorded just so that we can share this information with any community members who weren't able to make it to this particular session today. And we have a real-time captioner present. So if anyone would like to turn on captioning, you can use the little CC button at the bottom right of your screen. So I'll go back now to introductions. My name is Jess Gibson. I'm the Assistant Director here at Disability and Accessibility Resources, and I'm here with my colleague, and I will let her introduce herself.
I thank you for taking time out of your very, very busy day during this very busy week to join us. We always enjoy these sessions and a chance to talk with students' parents as you're handing them over and entrusting them to read and our staff to be the support that they need. My name is Teresa Lowry. I'm the director of the Disability and Accessibility Resources Program. I use she, her pronouns, as does Jess. And we are happy to talk with you today, covering some wide range of information. Of course, in this short session, we will only be able to touch in on a number of things, but you're always welcome to email us with follow-ups or questions, either following this presentation or throughout the course of the fall semester.
Great. So as Teresa mentioned, we know that you have a lot of questions on your mind today. Hopefully you also got a lot of information from yesterday's sessions and other orientation sessions here, but we'll try to touch on some of the general student support resources that are available at Read in addition to the disability specific resources. I will be facilitating today and taking a look at any questions. So if you do have a question, you are welcome to type it into the chat, preferably as a private message to me, but really just however you want to send your question through the chat is fine. One thing that we do request is that if you have a question that is specific to your student, that might be better discussed in a phone or video appointment that you're welcome to schedule with us afterwards. We ask that you please not share your student's private or personal health information in this setting today. So I'm going to begin with a brief overview of what we're going to cover, and then we will get into it. So I'm going to start the presentation here. Have some fancy slides to share with everyone. Let's see. All right. Is that looking the way it should look? I hope.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So, to get started here, what are we going to be talking about today? Let me see. All right. So we're going to start by giving you an overview of just who is Disability and Accessibility Resources. What do we do exactly? Then we will get into specific questions that have been submitted ahead of time, as well as some questions that we anticipate that you might have. And then, again, as I mentioned, we're always happy to meet with folks individually afterwards for a phone or video appointment, and you can email us as well. All right, so let's get started with who is DAR and what do we do?
This is Teresa again. I've been at Read for about 10 years, but in the field for quite a while. And our main goal in the disability accessibility realm in higher education is to work with our students who have medical or mental health conditions, as well as learning differences or other sensory disabilities and disabilities that impact their student life. They may need support, services, or adjustments. We call them accommodations in our world, in order to have equal access to the programs and resources that Read offers. So our main goals are access and inclusion for your students. removing barriers where we can, and really relying on our students to partner with us and let us know what their needs are. Communication is key in so much of what we do. So we ask students to please let us know if they're having problems or if they need to use services while they're here at the college. Currently, we have about 20 to 25% of our students at Reed registered with our department and using some type of accommodation. So your student never needs to feel like they're the only one or no one's ever asked these questions before. We've probably heard it, probably done it. Professors are well versed in working with students and accommodations as well. So sometimes normalizing that and realizing a quarter of our population using accommodations can be really reassuring to your students or to parents. So qualifying health conditions, as I mentioned, could be mental health, chronic medical conditions, learning differences or disabilities, hearing, visual impairments, any of those kinds of conditions that have a significant impact on a major life activity, such as living, walking, working, going to school, education, those sorts of things. Types of services that we offer often include accommodations in the realm of the academic or classroom environment, housing, PE type accommodations, and others if there's student activities or other programs going on campus for which your student might need accessibility accommodations. They can work with us or other departments to ensure that those are put into place in a timely manner. We have a real individualized approach. I mentioned kind of a quick overview of the types of conditions that might benefit from accommodations or use them here. But the diagnosis in our determination and working with students is often secondary to talking about the functional impact of that. So, two students could have the same diagnosis, but the implications and how it impacts them individually could look wildly different. And so their accommodations might be different in the course of our working with them. The common accommodations that we might offer, you might be familiar with, maybe your child or student used them when they were in middle school or high school or at another college, might include extra time for test or testing in an optional or alternate environment, having their textbooks in a digital or audio format, getting supplemental notes for their lecture-based courses, having a lab assistant if physically needed. And again, the list is, quite long and very individualized. So we work with your student to identify what they are going to need to minimize the barriers they may encounter during their time here. And we'll talk more about specific accommodations as we go through the presentation. Jess, did you want to pick up here or is this still me? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think it was still you, but I'm happy to jump in.
All right. So one of the questions that we often hear is my student had a 504 or IEP plan in high school, or maybe they went to a small individualized high school. We're seeing more of that as well, where maybe accommodations weren't needed or used as readily because it was very individualized instructions. So parents often ask, as do students, do accommodations work the same way in college? Main thing to keep in mind is that there is a different set, while there may be commonalities in what students can ask for and receive, there is a different set of laws and philosophies kind of guiding what we do in the two different systems. So K through 12 is under IDEA, and they have a mission to promote inclusion, minimize barriers for students in the academic realm of K through 12, whereas we are really under with the American with Disabilities Act and 504 Act, which is really about access. We aren't guaranteeing success or modifying accommodations in the same kind of way. We are working with barriers and removing them for our students. There's some nice charts online if you're interested in seeing the breakdown of those two things that kind of compare IDEA with the 504 ADA guidelines. But this is just legal jargon really to help frame the conversation that things might be a little bit different in college than they were previously. As the slide says, the accommodations themselves may differ than what your student had in high school, but still providing that information in forms of documentation can be helpful to us because it can give us an idea of what the student did use in high school, what they found helpful, what they tried and didn't work. So it can potentially be documentation for us, an IEP or a 504 plan, but it may not be the end all be all in terms of what we need to determine the college level accommodations. The other really big and important difference is a lot more is going to be shifting to the student in terms of responsibilities and commitment to communicate with our office or the college in general about what they need. So we don't have a special ed team. We don't necessarily have, scheduled team meetings where we're going to be sitting down and recruiting students to come in and pulling them in to meet with us in our office. It really falls more and more to the student in the higher ed environment to be proactive, seek out accommodations, request those accommodations each semester, and then work with their faculty in our department to ensure that they are in place and meeting their needs. The other big piece of this, if there's any problems that the students are encountering with their accommodations, or they find their accommodations may not be working, it's really incumbent upon the student to let us know, because we're not able to be out there micromanaging student packages for each student. If they need something different or something is not working the way they feel it ought to be working, we need to hear as soon as possible so that we can be proactive and help find solutions for them.
Yeah, and I'll add that students may be new at articulating exactly what accommodations they need or what their needs are, and that's okay. Part of our individualized work with students is as long as they reach out to us and let us know that they're interested in DAR or in accommodations, we can then have a conversation with them to explore how does this disability impact you? What does it look like for you in the classroom when you're reading, when you're trying to complete assignments? And we can help the student figure out an accommodation plan that will be the best fit for them here at Reed. Which I guess gets me into the next slide, which is how do students request accommodations here at Reed? Um, in a nutshell, basically, they submit a form, they provide some kind of disability documentation to us, and then they meet with us. So what you can see here is a screenshot of our DAR webpage. So if anyone just wants to Google Read Disability, you'll find our webpage, and you'll see there that there are a few buttons on the right. So a student can click on the red button to request academic accommodations. That will lead them to our accommodation request form. Or if they're wanting housing accommodations, they click on that blue teal button, and that leads them to the housing accommodation request form. Students can upload their documentation with that same form, or the documentation can be sent to us via email or fax. US mail, a little less recommended these days, but we will also receive it that way. So any way students want to get to documentation to us is fine. Providers, mental health or healthcare providers can also just send the documentation directly to us. Once we have those two things, then we'll meet with the student for an intake meeting. That's really the one-on-one chance for Teresa and I to talk with your student individually about their needs, their accommodations, and really anything else that could be on their mind as they're transitioning to Reed. I will add that if students don't have documentation right away, if they're not sure if the documentation is adequate, I would still encourage students to just connect with us and get started. Oftentimes, we can put some provisional or temporary accommodations in place while the student is gathering documentation if, say, the documentation isn't readily available. Or maybe we have something that's a good start, but we need a little more. Again, we can put some accommodations in place on a temporary basis because we recognize that it can take time to gather all the documentation that's necessary. And students are also welcome to just schedule an informational meeting if they want help navigating this process or have questions about how to get started. Maybe they're not totally sure they want to use accommodations yet. They're also welcome to just schedule a brief phone or video conversation with us to just learn more about what we do, and then they can decide whether they'd like to use accommodations at this time. So after that intake meeting, when we discuss, the individual student's accommodations, we come up with the list of accommodations that the student will generally be eligible for at Reed. But then you might ask, how do we actually notify faculty of students' accommodations? So we have a special DAR student portal. DAR is what we call ourselves for short, Disability and Accessibility Resources. So students will be able to log in to a DAR student portal. They'll see the accommodations that they're eligible for, and they will also see their course schedule. So for each of their fall semester courses, they'll be able to say, for my Hume class, I need these 3 accommodations. For my math class, I need those 2. They can customize their accommodation requests depending on their anticipated needs for each course. DAR staff, we then review those requests, we approve them, and an email is sent to faculty. The student also receives a copy of the email. That email will describe the accommodations that the student has been approved for in that course. One difference from high school and college is that the student's diagnoses or health conditions, those are not disclosed to faculty. In the college setting, typically that information stays with us here at DAR. We share information on a need to know basis only, and in this case, we figure what the faculty really needs to know is what are the students' accommodations. Um, so from there, some accommodations might require just the student and the professor to talk about logistics. So for example, if a student's going to be using extra time on the exam, the student and the professor will have to work out, does that mean the student is going to be starting a little bit early, or does that mean they're going to be starting a little bit late? So that's just a chance for the student and the instructor to discuss, not whether the student needs accommodations or not why they need accommodations, but really just how will these accommodations work in this course. Faculty are generally, as Teresa mentioned, they're used to receiving these letters. They're well versed in having these conversations with students. So, most likely this is something that should be pretty comfortable for the professor and the student. But with that said, if students ever have questions or would like assistance having those conversations with faculty, we always encourage students or faculty to reach out to us, and we're happy to help facilitate those conversations if that could be helpful. Okay.
All right. So one of the questions that we often get is, besides the classroom accommodations, which is largely DAR's purview and responsibility to help put into place at the college, what are some of the other resources that students, particularly students with disabilities, might find helpful here at Reed? So we always like to touch in on these. We're not going to be able to go into much depth, but these are ones that I think students and parents over the course of the summer have been asking a lot of questions about. And so we just like to put these up here for you to take a look at. We work closely with our academic support colleagues. We share a building together. We sometimes co-facilitate workshops together. And we do a lot of referring back and forth between our departments. So academic support is the office that does academic coaching, similarly to what we might do with our students with disabilities. And I think Jess might talk about that a little more in depth in a few minutes. And coordinate the tutoring program, as well as many other things. These are just short abbreviated highlights that we're featuring here. DAR is really responsible not only for accommodations, but we do short-term coaching as well. So primarily around executive functioning challenges, which might be because of an ADD diagnosis or a mental health challenge. Sometimes students need help with things like study skills, organization, breaking big research projects down into smaller chunks so they feel more manageable. Those students can work with us on a short-term basis, kind of maybe 3 weeks in a row, Mondays at 2 o'clock, and we set up an appointment, for example. They can come in and work with Jess or I to identify what do they want to be focusing on. Are there specific strategies or specific hurdles they keep running into? And we'll work with them wherever they're meeting, with us in terms of what they want to cover and how we might be most helpful. I think one other slight difference with DAR besides the executive functioning is Jess and I have a strong background in learning differences and chronic mental health conditions and how they impact students in the environment. So I think really for coaching, either academic support or DAR can be helpful for students we work with. Go ahead.
I'll just add, I think we received a couple questions beforehand about resources specific to students who have autism or anxiety. This is not specific to those students, but it just struck me that this is a resource that could especially be beneficial for students who might have a hard time with change. So maybe setting up a few coaching sessions with DAR earlier in the semester, even just to have a chance to check in around how are things going? Are you settling in? Are you able to find all your readings and your syllabi? Things like that. Um, our availability at DAR does tend to be a little more booked up in the first 2 weeks because we're meeting with students around their accommodations. But after that, our availability opens up and we could meet with students for short-term coaching just to help with that initial transition as well. Sorry, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay. So yeah, so we have students that maybe start off the semester using coaching, knowing in advance their diagnosis or their experience, or maybe they had a coach in high school and it was really helpful. Other students might access coaching maybe just mid-semester if they hit a wall or they feel like, wow, I'm really stressed out, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how in the world I'm supposed to do this much work when I only have this much time each week. Those are perfect times to seek out support through the coaching programs. Again, that's meeting with the professional staff in these two departments to kind of work on reframing what's going on for a student and help them connect with resources that could be useful. Health and Counseling Center. We do have a health center on campus. We refer to it as the HCC for Health and Counseling Center. If your student with a disability has medication management questions, needs referrals or short-term counseling, referrals to off-campus providers for longer-term, more involved psychiatric care or medical specialists, the HCC is really the office that's going to be able to help with that. So they're another department we do a lot of referring to. Sometimes students also are interested in getting a new learning evaluation or perhaps seeking a learning evaluation for the first time. We have resources in the HCC that can help connect them to providers in the area that do that kind of evaluation, help them connect to financial resources on campus that can help offset the cost of that if it's a financial barrier for students seeking that evaluation, and just help them navigate between the college insurance and off-campus providers, that complex process that can be a little overwhelming for students at times. Faculty, of course, are an ongoing resource for our students. They provide advising. They have regular office hours for the classes the students are in that are taking it with a particular faculty. And they love it when students come by. I've gone by to faculty hours and popped my head in for a quick question, and maybe there's nobody there and they're always kind of bummed, like my office hours are here and nobody's coming. So I think one of the things, especially for new students, it can be a little intimidating going into a faculty office hours for the first time perhaps, but it truly is a resource. They'd love to talk about their passions and their projects and support students and help to clarify their questions if they have them. Again, asking those questions early on is really a key skill for succeeding in college and navigating a campus community. So encouraging your student as parent to ask the questions, find the right people, the right departments that can help them. And often going to a faculty advisor is a great first step. Just quickly, a couple of other ones is the Student Life Office, which is, we have the academic side of the house, as we call it. And then Student Life, which is encompassing our departments and a lot of these resources we're talking about here. There is a care team as well that looks at students who might be at higher risk or having particular challenges. There's a central support hub on the Student Life page to help navigate. You have this question, where do I go? Who do I talk to? So those can be really valuable resources as well, of getting a question posed and them getting you in touch with the right people, if nothing else. Residence Life deals mainly with housing questions. There's HAs, which are usually students that are house advisors. They help build community in their living environments. They support individual students as peers and mentors. They check in with people to see how they're doing. If they haven't seen them in the community room for a while, they might knock on a door and do a special invite to come on out or talk and see how things are. There's also professional staff called area coordinators, or the Residence Life staff that has the main offices in 28 West that really help and partner with us around housing accommodations, housing processes, roommate change requests, how that works, how that doesn't work. All of those housing related questions should probably go to Residence Life as a first step, unless it's specifically about a disability related issue. And then finally, student life activities, we wanted to mention about how significant it can be for a student to get involved on campus outside of their academics, maybe get outside their head a little bit, take a PE class or sign up for a team sport, go to various speakers that we offer on campus, or fun events that are happening in the quad or in commons. There's always a lot going on, and for students to be able to make those connections and friendships outside of the classroom can really be a key variable, I think, in their success and feeling a part of the larger community, which then instills a greater sense of belonging and can help in some ways mitigate some of the anxieties, their loneliness they may be feeling, if that's something that they're prone to experience.
Mhm. Thank you, Teresa, for that wonderful overview. So we imagine that you might also be wondering, as a parent or as a family member, as someone who cares about a student, what can you do to help support them during their time at Reed? And we'll have a few slides on this topic. First, we just want to acknowledge, I guess it says here parent roles, but I guess that should be caregiver or support roles. We acknowledge that some of you are parents, some of you are not. But all of you care about your students, and your own role is probably transitioning as well. You may have, had to do a lot to support your student in getting to this point. You've likely had to advocate for them in the K-12 system, or help with time management or planning, or helped to coordinate medical or mental health care. And you may have had a more direct role in problem solving up until now. And at this point, your role might start to shift one that's a little bit more on the supportive side and helping your student to develop their own problem solving skills. The hope is that your student will grow in their capacity to do that, and so that by the time that they're a senior and they're writing their thesis, they'll be adept at identifying their own needs and being able to ask for help when they need that. Of course, we'll be scaffolding, along the way to help get them to that point. So in the meantime, how can you help your student to problem solve? Let's say that they are calling you up in distress, or they're reporting that they're having some kind of challenge or difficulty. Teresa, do you want to take this part, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that on.
Great.
One of the things to know is one of your roles. Did you want to switch the slide, Jess?
I think we're still here.
Okay. As Jess said, your parent role is transitioning too. More and more of our focus will be going towards working directly with your student. However, we do welcome questions or concerns around processes or policies or our services offered. Sometimes parents, one of the biggest roles that you can play is to help connect your students to the resources so they can ask us those questions, okay? One of the other things, as Jess was mentioning about your role is helping students become more independent in their problem-solving skills is really to help them figure out what is it that they need. I mean, I think I can't, identify the number of times students will come into our office just with a sense of general overwhelm. I'm overwhelmed. There's so much going on. I'm buried. I don't know what to do next or how to break this down. One of the things, the first of all, is listening and acknowledging that that's a real thing the students are experiencing in that time, but helping the students kind of break that down and say, well, what does that look like? And what does that feel like? And are you talking about this or are you talking about that? What is most impacting their stress? Is it truly the amount of work in one particular class? Is it underlying conditions that underneath that maybe they're feeling lonely, or maybe they had a difficult, situation with a roommate or something like that. So being a good listener and helping your students kind of break it down into what really is going on there. And then once, even if it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different variables, having an idea of that instead of just this big tangled mass or ball of yarn that's a lot of stressors, teasing that apart, figuring out what it is that's actually impacting their stress or their situation, and helping them make a plan by asking, what might be your first step? What's one step that you can do in terms of helping you to make a decision or make a change? I think that kind of guidance is really valuable in working with this age group because, or when students are in distress, especially if they have a disability like an anxiety disorder or panic disorder or something where they need to first breathe, then deconstruct that sense of overwhelm, and then come up with a plan that maybe it's just taking that very first step of, well, I suppose I could call my professor and ask, why I got that C on my paper instead of the A I was expecting. Something like that can be really helpful in helping your student manage feelings of overwhelm or stress while they're here.
Okay. Another thing that I think, many of us have understood intuitively, but I think research and current practice in the field is also coming to bear to show how important it is to take a holistic approach to wellness. Students with disabilities might be working twice as hard as other students to manage everything, and they might need some additional encouragement to branch out and to take a break from academics at times. It can be tempting, I think, sometimes to focus exclusively on academics as a measure of quote unquote success or of how well they're doing. It may help them just hear some encouragement to make some connections with their peers, focus on relationships, maybe just go to that activity that the HA is sponsoring, meeting up with a classmate to study, or going to professor's office hours to just get to know their professor a little bit better. As Teresa mentioned, anything that can help to foster that sense of connection and belonging will go a long ways towards helping that student feel at home here at Reed. Um, if they have any hobbies or interests that they did before college, certainly encouraging them to continue to cultivate those here. So maybe taking some guitar lessons or connecting with other gamers at Reed. There are opportunities. The Student Activities Office could be, or HAs, the House Advisors. Those are great people to talk to if students are wanting help getting connected. And also, of course, the chance to get outdoors. Reed has a beautiful canyon where students can go for little walks and hikes. And our sports center recently is opened up by appointment for students, I believe. Right across the street from Reed, there's also the Rhododendron Gardens, which I believe is free for our Reed students. Um, so yeah, helping your student to think about, maybe what they need is not necessarily to spend another hour reading. Maybe what they need today is to take a break from that and go for a walk and then come back and do some more reading. um, Another thing that you might be able to help them with is broadening their perspective. It's really easy, again, just to get so narrowed in and focused on, the classes and the tests and the assignments right in front of them. But we've seen that it really can be helpful for students to just remember even and acknowledge the life that is beyond Reed. The things that are happening outside of this community are important as well, and can help give the students some perspective on, this thing that I'm experiencing right now is right now and it's temporary, but this too will pass. So you might consider discussing current events with your student, just what's going on in the broader world or in the broader community. Connecting them with the Center for Life Beyond Reed. So if students are interested in looking at jobs or internships for breaks, our CLBR is a great resource. Students also can volunteer. There are places here at Reed where they can help students find volunteer activities. The office that coordinates that is called SEEDS. And then students can actually also get PE credit. I believe we call it our community education credits. So a couple of their PE credits can be fulfilled through some kind of volunteer activity. And of course, there's always as well Portland, I should add. The city of Portland is a lovely way to get off campus and get a change of scenery.
I'd like to add something really quick before I get into my topic here
Yeah.
about PE. We do offer PE accommodations for students who have, physical or chronic medical conditions that may impact their ability to participate fully. And I almost always have a question or two about that from students and or families. So I would encourage, if that's an issue that pertains to your student or your student has questions about that, Reed does have a PE requirement. Our goal is not to waive a requirement, but figure out how to help students engage in that program in a way that's going to be meaningful and accessible to them. So one way, as Justice mentioned, is we do offer the community education or community involvement 2 credits of PE could be earned doing that instead of physical activity. There's also ways we adjust content of PE courses if need be. If somebody wants to take accessible PE, I know the PE team has actually brought in specialists from Portland Parks and Rec to help do some training and help a student in a wheelchair learn how to harness it and rock climb, for example. There's lots of different opportunities that we would explore with the student to figure out of the 67 PE classes offered this semester, surely there's a few that sound somewhat intriguing, everything from bowling and juggling and ping pong to your more traditional aerobics and kickboxing and weightlifting, conditioning, those kinds of things. So first of all, what is the student interested in? It can dovetail nicely with what Jess was also saying about getting physical, getting moving, getting up and engaging in some fun outside of the classroom and the library. There's also an outdoor program that can provide, free camping gear or backpacking gear for our students. But PE credits, looping back to that, is something that students are going to be required to get over the course of their 4 years here. And if they need accommodations to successfully engage in our PE programs, whichever classes they're interested in, we've had some really creative and fun, innovative ways to help students connect to those classes, even if they felt or were unsure whether it was a good fit for them. So just saying, let them know. They can talk to us if they have questions, because there's lots of different variables that we can explore. Okay. So what can you do as a parent to support your student during their time at Reed? One of the key things we find, similarly to what we talk about with our students, and say communication with our department or with your faculty is really key for us being able to be helpful, is communicating with their family. So not necessary, certainly not required, but there are a number of families that will talk about it before they leave their student here at our campus or before even coming to our campus, about expectations about a family communication plan. So that's a fancy way of saying, how often do you want me to text, or how often do you not want me to text? I remember the first year one of my youngest was off to college and I was always just sending these goofy Facebook things and memes that I thought were really funny, and they didn't really think were very funny, but I thought it was a way for me to feel connected. And then finally he said, Mom, I can't read those when you're sending them to me. I've got other things I need to do. And so I wasn't getting a response to my Facebook memes I was sending them that I thought were so cute and clever, and realized that I was doing it more for me than perhaps reaching out to my child in college and figuring out what their needs were. So really having a conversation with them in advance about what are the expectations? Are they going to call you every Sunday night at least to check in? Does that feel reasonable and supportive enough? Or are they a student that's going to want to check in for maybe 10 minutes at the end of each day and tell you how the day went or how they're feeling or how they're doing? Every family and every student is going to be different. But by clarifying some expectations around that, it can help have a plan so you're not going to worry if you haven't heard all week. You're going to hear from on Sunday. If you're sending them all kinds of cutesy things on Facebook and you're not getting the haha or LOL back like me, it doesn't mean they're ignoring you or anything like that. It just wasn't really working for them. So I think that having that communication in advance could have probably preserved my having a little bit of hurt feelings of not hearing back from my kid as often as I would have liked, but also helped me understand that, yeah, okay, this is something that they can commit to. And so we talk every Thursday kind of thing. So that can be really helpful for everybody, just to have a clear level of expectations of what's going to work for the both of you and what's the means by which you want to be communicating regularly. I think that also touches in on communicating with faculty or with student life or with our department. Is a student okay with you talking with one of us about, did they come to their coaching appointment this week or not? What did you talk about in your coaching appointment? That's a conversation that you are really going to be having with your student, because we're not in a position to share that back to you unless we had a release of information. So talking with your student about what level of involvement they would like or that you would like to have with some of these support resources as well can be really valuable to help, again, minimize miscommunications over time. The other thing listed here is using a care team referral form if you're connected to your student. And I'm going to ask Jess to speak about that, because you, Jess, have actually been on the care team and can give a nice, concise summary of what that might look like from a family perspective.
Yes, absolutely. The care team is a group of professionals from different departments in student life. So there's a representative from DAR, from academic support, from residence life, from financial aid, from the Center for Life Beyond Read. And we all get together as a group. And we're basically there as I guess a centralized way to coordinate a support for a student if needed, rather than having the student bounce around from one office to the next, not sure where to go. The care team can be just a nice centralized place to figure out, you know, what is really the thing that I need help with, the most right now, and who can help me with that. So students can self-refer themselves to the care team. There is an online form that a student can fill out, or anyone who's concerned for a student can fill out. The form goes to the care team manager, or one of our associate deans, who then can just take a look at this and triage and gather the appropriate support. So, sometimes I'll receive an email from the care team manager saying, "Hey, Jess, could you reach out to the student? They mentioned that they're struggling with mental health stuff and they're interested with accommodations," and then I might connect with that student. Um, so if a student is not sure who's the best person to help them, they could fill out the care team form for themselves. If you would like someone from the care team to connect with your student, then you can fill out the care team form as well. I believe the form will ask you if you are okay, having it shared with the student that you filled out the care team form. And it's okay if you say yes, and it's okay if you say no. And as Teresa mentioned, our ability to circle back to you and let you know what our student interactions have been will probably be limited. We would only be able to do that if we had a specific release of information from the student. But we are always happy to receive information from you. So you're always welcome to share information with us. Whoops, sorry, phone call. You're always welcome to share information with us, and then we will take that information into account as we're trying to figure out, how to best support your student. And there's more information about the care team on the care team webpage as well. All right, so I think that is it for our pre-submitted questions. I do see there's at least one question in the chat. So in just a moment, I'm going to end the screen sharing and I'll go back to sharing our presenter faces, so you'll get a chance to see us again. But I just wanted to show here again, if you did have a question right now, please go ahead and type it into the chat. You can send it to me as a private message if you prefer. And then if you have any questions that are of a more sensitive nature or that you just want to discuss individually with us, then you can email us at dar@reed.edu or schedule a phone or video appointment with us. So let's see here. Stop the screen sharing, and I believe we are back. Hello. So I'm going to take a look here in the chat and see what questions we have. So there's a question about if a student is using some kind of prescription medication, do they need to in some way register that or inform the college? I would say if this is a medication that the student, is already, I guess if the reason is like, do I need to notify someone at the school that my student is taking this? No. The students can engage in any medical treatment that they need to, and that's at the discretion of the student and their medical providers. If the question is there someone at Reed who can help prescribe that medication? The answer is maybe. We do have folks at the Health and Counseling Center who are able to prescribe a wide range of medications. So students would need to work directly with our Health and Counseling Center folks to figure out what kind of medication management they can provide. Anything to add to that, Teresa?
I think that's good. A number of you that I've spoken to perhaps over the summer, we've also talked about the importance of medication management and transferring of care. So if you have questions about either one of those, maybe they're seeing somebody in your home state that doesn't treat when a student is out of state. There's all kind of nuances with different state regulations and insurance regulations. Please just call the health center or the health center director directly, because they'll be the ones best positioned to answer those kinds of connection or questions. If you need to transfer prescriptions, they can connect you with the medical director or doctors within the HCC that can work with the original care providers to get medical records and perhaps transfer that. We also have pharmacies nearby, near campus, where students can ride a bike or Uber over if they need to pick prescriptions up. But I think that transferring of care, both for continuity, whether it's medical or mental health, and then transferring of prescriptions are things that are great to be looking into at the very beginning of the semester, not when your child has 2 tablets left and is about to run out of a prescription, because that's probably the worst time to try to figure out a plan. So just try to be proactive or help your child student be more proactive as you make these changes and transitions.
Mhm. We also had a question about, are there any places on campus where students can see animals? Like take an animal or pet an animal or take an animal on a walk. That's a lovely idea. I don't think we have any kind of formal program at the moment. Um, there are quite a few staff members who bring their dogs to work. And so sometimes, students might see some dogs around campus accompanying staff members. Our campus is also open to, people from the community who come and walk their dogs. So I would say there's often an opportunity to request if a student can pet or play with a dog for a little bit. I do know sometimes, like around finals week, they also might bring in, I think in the past we had Rojo the llama who came to visit students. And perhaps
The
some,
corgis, we had the corgis,
yeah, yep,
the whole flock, or whatever
corgis.
you would call
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
floggings of
yep.
corgi puppies.
So, sort of like one-time limited opportunities to go see some adorable pets and go interact with them.
We do have 2 areas that are off-leash dog park kind of spaces on campus as well. So that's a fun place to just go sit at the picnic table and watch the dogs. Just a word of caution and or respect is if students do see an animal who is serving or working as a support or service animal, to please always ask an owner before you just walk up and start kissing or stroking or playing or tickling a dog. If they're wearing a vest or if the harness is such, or it just appears that they're in a working mode, that's always just best protocol for other friends or colleagues or staff members that may have a working animal with them to ask permission before you reach out to them.
Thank you for that reminder. I do also see here that the folks at our orientation staff is letting me know that the Thursday of orientation week, there will be a petting zoo
Oh,
on
fun.
at 3 p.m. At the Grove. So in the area in front of the Grove buildings and the quad there will be a petting zoo. Sorry, 4 p.m. 4 p.m. is when you can go pet animals in front of the Grove. Okay, I'll just allow another minute or so in case anyone wants to type in another question.
I had one, Jess, I wanted to speak to. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's questions about tutoring. And while I did mention tutoring in passing, I didn't really explain that because that's a really critical support a lot of students and parents have questions about. The director of the tutoring program is actually, I think, in our audience today, but I won't put him on the spot right now. My understanding is, yes, tutoring is moving full speed ahead, but in an online environment for the majority of it. Is that correct? Jess, do you know?
I believe so, yeah. So students will be able to connect with tutors virtually, certainly for the individual tutoring. I'm not sure about the group drop-in tutoring, but there will be both group and individual tutoring available for students. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also just encourage students to try it out. In a traditional year, there's drop-in tutoring, and students can go to as little or as much as they'd like. Usually the first week or so of the semester, the department's putting together the schedule and showing where and when the group tutoring might be offered. Students can go to, if it's offered Monday through Friday from 5 to 7, they can go to all 10 hours if they want to and they find it helpful. A number of the students that we do work with have found that to be a useful resource, but also will engage perhaps with the individual tutoring. So typically that's 1 hour per week per class that a student can arrange to meet with a tutor one-on-one. Time and place really dependent upon those two individuals to figure out what will work with their schedule and where and when they want to meet. As an accommodation on occasion, if students are really not able to participate fully in the drop-in tutoring because it's too anxiety provoking, or perhaps because it's triggering for some reason, or maybe it's just going at a pace that doesn't work with their learning style or their learning differences, they can come and talk to Jess and I, and we can either give them some hints and strategies for being successful or more successful and comfortable in that environment. Or on occasion, we are able to offer additional one-on-one tutoring per subject matters that are more challenging. If somebody, for example, has a math disability and is trying to get their way through a statistics class, perhaps 2 hours of one-on-one tutoring is going to make all the difference in the world to them. So having that conversation and just exploring those options is really important for students to know that they can do that with Jess and I. We then consult with academic support or the faculty member or whoever might need to be brought into the conversation and can offer that as sort of not standard, but additional accommodation if and when needed.
Yeah, our peer tutoring program at Reed is really great. There are subject-specific tutors, so students can get tutoring that's specific to chemistry or bio or psych or writing. Um, I do see here a message from David says that students can do individual one-on-one tutoring either in person or online, and group or drop-in tutoring will be offered in person with masks required.
Okay.
So the group or in person, that's a great opportunity for the student to just drop by. I'm like, ah, I'm having a hard time with this particular problem, on my bio homework. Writing tutoring, I think, can be really good for students, especially students who tend to have difficulty making progress on writing assignments in advance. This can be a great way to build in some external accountability. If you're going to be meeting with a writing tutor to talk about your draft, that means you have to have a draft ready a few days beforehand. And also just, I think a lot of times our students can sort of get stuck in their own way of thinking, and just having someone else to talk to and bounce ideas off of can help get students unstuck and helping to make progress in those things.
I think we've also found it helpful to help students think about using it, again, sort of as a strategic tool. So if they have a problem set due for econ every Thursday, make sure you meet with a tutor maybe on Tuesday to allow you time to go through the problems or the homework and get support on those 3 questions that you're really stumbling over, for example. So I think that it is a very integral part of the experience at Reed. It doesn't really have a notion of being remedial in tutoring. Tutoring is a kind of normal part of what our students as a whole engage in, and the numbers who utilize that services are very high. Faculty love it when they hear that students are engaging in tutoring and getting that extra support if they truly need it. There's no real stigma attached to that, which some students carry over from high school if they had a experience where maybe they felt self-conscious asking for extra help or going to the learning center or something like that to help, again, as we talked about at the very beginning, normalize that experience. It's the smart students that reach out for help when they need it or find those resources that they need to engage in to help them be successful. And so we want them utilizing those services. We know Reed is challenging. That's why we have a lot of supports out there available to help our students be successful.
Yeah, to echo
Getting
that,
close to the end here, Jess. I don't know if there's any last minute questions or closing remarks we want to dive into or have time for.
yeah, just one last quick one that's also about tutoring. To echo what Teresa said,
Okay.
I think a good number of our students who are tutors are students who used tutoring before they were tutors. So yes, we do hire fellow students to provide the tutoring, and they go through a hiring and training process through academic support.
I would
Okay.
also just add, if a student goes to a tutoring session and for whatever reason that one tutor was not a good fit, don't give up on the program. Advice to a student, if you're hearing that from them, is try again with another tutor or go to a different night for drop-in. Maybe there's a different tutor on staff then. But if they're truly having problems with finding a good match for tutoring, you can always loop back to one of us or academic support, the tutoring program coordinators, and talk with them directly.
All right. And
Okay.
with that, thank you all so much for attending. We look forward to working with your students, and I think that's all the time we have today.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much. Enjoy your
Bye.
week. Bye-bye.